Hey guys, welcome to this experimental embroidery workshop. Today I'm going to be showing you a range of different ways that you can use alternative materials in hand embroidery and create some really wacky and kind of quite different outcomes, including stitch. So what you're going to need is you're going to need a hoop or a frame of some sort. So I've just got a basic hoop. A piece of fabric to work on. As you can see, I've already started a little bit here, but plain piece of fabric's fine, or a piece of work you've started. A pair of scissors, a pen, so a fabric marker pen or a pencil is fine, and some normal embroidery thread or some sort of sewing thread that you've got that you might put on a machine or something. And then you're going to need lots of recycled and alternative materials. So I've collected lots of offcuts of yarns, fabric, ribbons, things like that. Could be from like a macrame project or a crochet project or anything that you can find that you'd like to use. And then in here I've got a basket full of upcycled materials, things I've collected from around the house. I've got offcuts from sequins, I've got foam, all sorts of it. So you might want to take a little bit of time to look in your recycling, or see what you can source in somewhere like Wilko's, where you can get bags of kind of repetitive, quite cheap items that you can work with. But if you can try and recycle, that's even better. Also look for things that attract you, like colours, textures, different kind of thicknesses of yarns, or things that you could see getting your needle through. Also things like elastic where you could cut them up, or foam where you can cut them up. I've got bits of plastic, lollipop sticks, and at the bottom, which you can't see right now because there's so much in here, we've got things like just normal beads and sequins as well. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to hoop up your fabric. So when you've picked a piece of fabric that you want to work with, just open up your hoop and make sure it's come apart like that. Place the bit of the hoop on the table that doesn't have a screw on it. Place your fabric over the top, and then just make sure you loosen up your screw, just left loose, right tight on this side. And you're just going to use your body weight to pop your fabric in the hoop. Now I've just popped it in a way that I've got a bit of excess fabric here that I'm going to work with. You might need to loosen it up a little bit more. Okay, once you've gripped your hoop in place, you're just going to pull your fabric round just to make sure it's sitting like a canvas, so you're ready to start stitching. As you can see on mine, I've used a slightly smaller hoop here. This will come off with my iron, so I'm going to be working into this space now because I want to go a little bit bigger with my design. Just bear that in mind. Okay, once you've hooped up your fabric, the next thing you're going to do is just take a needle, any size embroidery needle you've got to hand, and you're going to take the end of your thread. Now your thread should not be any longer than your arm's length. If you want to measure it against your arm's length, that's a good idea. Push your thread through that needle, and a good tip for that is to take the thread to the needle, not the needle to the thread. Pull it through so you've got a bit of a tail, and at the end of your thread you want to pop a knot. Now the way I do my knot is I'll take my needle, take the end of the thread like so, and wrap it round that needle. So I'm wrapping it round 3 times. The more wraps, the bigger your knot will be. Then grip your wraps and pull them down the eye of the needle, making sure you grip all those wraps, and then pull it all the way to the end, and you'll end up with a knot. If that's a little bit too tricky, you can always just take the end of your thread and do a bit of a twist there. But the only thing with doing it that way is it can be difficult to get all your knots on top of each other, depending on how big you need it. So if you want to rewind the video and rewatch that, you can do that now. Otherwise, we're ready to start stitching. Okay, now we're ready to start stitching. We're going to start with a really basic stitch called couching. And couching allows you to stitch down things that might not fit through the eye of the needle, so it's a really useful stitch. So here I've got things like ribbon, I've got pipe cleaners, I've got bits of recycled plastic that I've cut up, and these can all be couched down. So we're going to start just with this cord here that I've already started. And all you're going to do is you're going to place this down in place, and then you can bring your needle up through the back of the cloth, and all you're doing is making small stitches over the top of the thing you want to couch down. Now this is the same for anything you choose. You're just making sure that the distance between your couching is as you want it. So obviously if you're going around complicated corners, you might need more stitches. And you want to think about the colour of your thread in relationship to the colour of the thing you're couching down. So you might want to have it contrasting or have it blending in. And as you can see, what I've done is I've done one side of my couched piece here, and then I'm coming in and finishing off this end. So I find it easier to start in the middle and do one side, and then come to the other side and do the others, and that just stops it from slipping out at the end there. If it helps you, you can also draw a line to follow your couching, if that helps. So with your fabric marker pen, at any time during this lesson, you can use your fabric marker pen to actually draw out the direction that you want this couching to go in. So I'm just going to draw out the line I want it to follow. It can be as complicated or simple as you want, just to give you an idea of how you follow a design line. Tie your thread off at the back. The easiest way to do that is just to catch a little bit of the stitching on the back of your cloth and pull your needle through that stitching so that you create a loop in the right hand. Pop that needle through the loop and transfer the loop to the opposite hand. Just do that one more time where you take your loop, needle through, and on the final time you're just going to pop that needle through and you create a knot. If that's a little bit too difficult for you, you can always just hold the thread here and then twist the yarn around the knot like so. You can rewind the video to watch that again. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to apply some applique to your embroidery, and you can do this using any sorts of recycled materials or fabrics or things that you've got that are flat here. So as you can see, I've got some felt, some foam, I've used some fake leathers here and some other fabrics and cork within here. So whenever you want like a solid shape within your design, this is a really good stitch to do. So just take a piece of something flat that you want and just cut out your desired shape. You could always draw this onto the back or just cut freely like I'm doing here. As you can see, I've got a piece of foam here that I'm wanting to use in my design and some felt which already has some areas cut out, so we're getting a bit of applique and reverse applique happening. And then all you're going to do is take this embroidery thread and do a stab stitch just off the edge and then onto the shape. And you can do this around any sort of fabric with the same method of stitching, and it's just a padding stitch that's used a lot in beadwork and goldwork techniques to secure a piece of flat fabric or background or padding to the surface of your cloth. So doing it in an experimental way, you can pretty much question whatever this is. It doesn't have to be felt or foam to get a 3D effect. It could be anything that you want. So things like tin foil, you could collect different plastic bags or scrap fabrics lying around your house. Okay, so as well as working with kind of flat objects or objects that we can couch over, we can also work with turning everyday objects into beads as well. So by that I mean finding some stuff that potentially has a way of being turned into a bead of some kind. So here I've got a selection of things. I've got washers, as you can see already on my piece. I've got plastic tubing, straws, elastic bands, loom bands, scoobies, and lots of other bits and bobs. So try and find or source something similar, as I'm going to show you how to work with these next. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is bring my needle up, take one of my first items, which is a spring, and just place that needle through the center of the spring. So rather than going over the top, I'm just actually stitching through the center, and this can be quite interesting if you use things that are transparent or that you can see through, because it means that you're going to bring in the color of the thread as well as the color of the object that you've collected. Okay guys, so just to finish off the lesson, I'm just going to show you a couple of different ways that you can apply beads and sequins with these unusual materials to combine sort of technique and texture and different ways of working with experimental embroidery really. So what you're going to need to do for this bit is you're just going to have to change to like a beading needle or a needle that's quite thin like the one I've got here. So basically you just need to check that the needle goes through any of the beads or sequins you might want to use for your piece. So just normal beads and sequins are fine. So I'm just going to go through first of all just how to attach a bead to the cloth, in case you don't know. So the way to attach a basic bead like this is that you can just bring your needle up, pick up the bead that you want of choice, and then slide it down. And then if you just pick up and come out in your new spot, and then wrap this round just so it's pulling it through, up through the loop, and your bead will sit perfect on the surface of your cloth. And your needle's already up and thread ready to do the next section. If it's the last one, you can just tuck your thread back down through the cloth, but the way of just looping it round that bead a little bit just helps it sit perfect on the cloth there. So now to move on to actually combining these beads with unusual materials, we're going to start with a bit of fabric manipulation. So like we did earlier with kind of working with flat pieces, we can actually combine sort of recycled materials to and beads, and use the beads to apply these down. So we'll just start about here, and all I'm going to do is start with a piece of ribbon. Just a piece of ribbon that I've got that I need to recycle, and I'm just going to start by building. I've got my thread coming through my cloth here, but on my needle I'm just going to start to build up a bit of a pattern with my beads. So we'll take a bit of the ribbon and then a bead, and then I'm just going to start to concertina it, so folding it while on my needle, and this just helps with a bit of fabric manipulation being introduced into the idea of experimental embroidery, and you can drag it down onto the needle as you work through. It's quite a nice way of working. So again, you can place it down so you can begin to see what it looks like. Your folds can be as big or as little as you like. Okay, as you can see, there's lots of different ways that you can build up and start to create texture within your work, and a kind of playful, more experimental approach to embroidery. Just a final thing I was going to show you is how to stack your beads just to get a bit more of a three-dimensional effect. So you could be stacking up any sort of sequin or bead. I'm going to start with a sequin, and then I'm going to pop on a a piece of experimental material, so it could be something like a straw. I've just got a bit of tubing here. I'm going to pop that through my needle. Because I'm using the beading needle, you've got a little bit more freedom to do different things. Again, I'm just going to finish that off with a seed bead at the top. So I've got my seed bead up at the top here. So just to show you what I've got on my needle is I've got a sequin, an experimental piece of material and a bead. I'm going to drag that all the way down to the surface of my cloth, and I'll just zoom in here so you can see. So the next thing I'm going to do is just move this out of the way, this top one. I'm going to place my needle back down through the tubing and the sequin. So what I've done is essentially use the top bead, so I'll take my needle through, all the way through and put it through. I've used the top bead just to hold that in place. And this will provide what's called a three-dimensional sort of look or approach to beadwork. So 3D beading is quite popular in different forms of embroidery, so you will have seen it quite a lot. But using this approach to embroidery, it means that we can add more experimental things rather than just beads and sequins. So I'll just do a couple more of these. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this experimental embroidery taster session. You get to do a lot more things like this when you study at the University of Huddersfield. If you want to check out my own Instagram, it's at Elnaz Yazdani, and I'm the embroidery technician at the University of Huddersfield, along with Melissa Fletcher. And I'm also a freelance artist on the side, so you can check out bits of work that our students have done and staff have done on the website, the university website, and Instagrams as well. Okay, and which is at Hood Textiles. So yeah, hope to see you all soon, and yeah, let me know if you've got any feedback.